you want this to stop. I want this to de-escalate. Obviously, I think the vast majority of us do. ICE agents are getting their fingers bitten off. People are dying. And the reality when I look at these people who are resisting or they think they're part of the revolution, I honestly, Josh, I think they are doing God's work. They believe they are fighting evil. I don't think these are bad people. I don't agree with whatever kind of mind virus has infiltrated their thought process and their belief system, but I want it to stop. The question becomes, and I've seen Nick Freitas and Scott Jennings put this forward, and I must admit I've thought of it myself, is that when a city is behaving in an untenable fashion, right? Like breaking into hotels, lighting shit on fire, kicking ICE cars, lights out, things like that. Do you turn down the heat because people are dying, people are getting hurt? But is that like having a 5-year-old that's totally out of control and letting the kid sort of dictate what goes on in the house because it's a real huge pain in the ass? And you don't want to spank your 5-year-old, or you don't want to put, who knows? They'd be in trouble all the time. I get the analogy. It's like you cannot let the lunatics run the asylum. Putting the law aside, what do you think Trump should do? So he just put this out. Turn over all incarcerated or active warrant criminal illegal aliens for immediate deportation. Transfer all criminal illegal aliens arrested by state and local police. Assist federal authorities in detaining criminal illegal aliens wanted for crimes. Democrats must work with the federal government in the rapid removal of all criminal illegal aliens. It's that simple. End the chaos.
Yeah, so look, I mean, no one wants to see more bloodshed. So let's get that out there very clearly stipulated. I think that everyone agrees with that. The question is how to do that. And the problem, Jillian, is that if you start bending the knee to Minnesota, you're going to get Brandon Johnson, the communist in Chicago, and Zohran Mamdani, the communist in New York City. They're going to start licking their chops and saying, wow, it looks like I can get away with a lot if I start protesting in there. And then these even bigger cities, the Minneapolis, could start to go to hell in a handbasket, or at least even more so than now. So, there's probably some sort of prudential sweet spot. Those quotes that you just read me from Tom Homan seem to me to be pretty reasonable. Personally, I am of the opinion that if you are here illegally, period, full stop, end of story, that is sufficient reason to deport you. By the way, that was a very bipartisan opinion as recently as like 2 or 3 decades ago. There was literally this clip of Bill Clinton speaking in the State of the Union address in 1995 saying exactly what I just said. So this wasn't that controversial, but it definitely makes sense to start with those who have committed heinous crimes, which, by the way, ICE typically actually does that. ICE is not, contrary to popular belief, they're not really going door to door, just trying to throw out the random guy picking strawberries or the Home Depot worker. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but they're overwhelmingly focusing on gangbangers, transnational criminals, pimps, murderers, rapists. They really are mostly focusing on the worst there. So they're already doing actually a lot of this there. But ultimately, Jillian, the law has to be enforced. And if you don't like federal immigration law, that's your prerogative. The way to change that is to lobby your member of Congress to change immigration law. It is not to get out there and to start kicking cars, to start spitting in agents' faces. And unless and until the law is changed, the law has to be enforced. And by the way, I know you said not to mention the law, but I'll throw out just one more provision. Yeah. Look, so there's, we mentioned the Article 6 Supremacy Clause. There's another more obscure constitutional provision that I think is very relevant here. It's in Article 4 of the Constitution. It's called the Guarantee Clause. And it basically says that the United States shall guarantee a Republican form of government to all the states, which basically means that, again, when you have a state of anarchy or lawlessness, then the federal government is constitutionally required to ensure that there is something that we can recognize as a true lowercase r Republican form of government there. Now, have we reached that threshold in Minnesota? Again, lawyers can differ on that. I think most people can differ on that one. But the point is that there is something of an obligation of the feds to restore order when order is simply not being had there. And that really fundamentally is how I view this there. So is there something of a middle ground there? Sure. I think the feds are being very conciliatory right now, frankly. I wouldn't trust these Minnesota Democrats for the life of me. I don't don't believe a darn word that I hear from a Tim Waltz or a Jacob Fry or any of these guys there. So I say keep the pressure coming. Maybe some alternative screws that can be turned as well, such as this funding thing that I floated there. But overall, Jillian, fundamentally, the law has to be enforced.
Small businesses are the backbone of the American economy, but getting funding from traditional banks is an uphill battle. So of the 36 million small businesses in the U.S., over 70% report needing additional capital every year. Now, while revenue is at an all-time high, big banks are tightening standards and approving fewer loans than ever, leaving owners stuck with mountains of paperwork. But if you want bank rates without the bank delays, check out cardiff.co/Jillian for up to $500,000 in same-day funding. Cardiff is the largest privately held small business lender in the U.S., having funded over $12 billion since 2004. Their application takes less than 5 minutes, has no impact on personal credit, and approvals happen in minutes with same-day funding. Banks try to lock out small businesses. Cardiff has the key. Big banks may not want to approve your business loans, but Cardiff does. So if you've been in business for at least a year and you're pulling in $20,000 a month in revenue, apply now for up to $500,000 in same-day business funding at cardiff.co/Jillian. Again, that's cardiff.co/Jillian. Real growth, fast funding, Cardiff. Borrow better. You know, it's funny. Minnesota, I think, is 1% of the deportations that have occurred since the beginning of Trump's second term. Texas is like 20-something%. And the comparison of red states versus blue states with regard to how many people have been deported is vastly divergent. Obviously, far more in the red states. And yet, you don't see this kind of chaos. And I find it odd, as several people have mentioned recently, including Joe Rogan, and oh my goodness, the guy from Shark Tank, Kevin, I think it's Kevin Leary, that all of a sudden, after you've got these massive fraud allegations coming out of Minneapolis, now you've got chaos in the streets. Do you think that there's a connection there, or is that super duper tin hat? Like, is this a massive organized distraction?
Look, I mean, DHS basically announced that they were going into Minneapolis right after the Somali fraud scandal broke into the national news, right? So this is a story in a few parts. So it was first Chris Rufo, who really breaks this story along with his colleagues at City Journal. And then Nick Shirley takes this thing to the whole next level with these YouTube videos there. And it was a few days after that DHS put out a tweet. I think it was like a Monday morning. It said like, "Good morning, Minneapolis," announcing that they were coming. So it was literally like A precipitates B. There was a direct causal connection there. So yeah, of course. I mean, you can't look the other way when it comes. I mean, and by the way, what is actually happening like with the tap? I mean, what are people drinking in Minnesota? I mean, Minnesota was also ground zero of the 2020 anarchy. Yes. I mean, Minnesota was where George Floyd died there. I mean, all this started in Minnesota back then. So I don't really know exactly what's happening there on the ground, what's in the tap water, what people are doing and saying there in Minnesota there. But there's a clear proclivity towards anarchy and lawlessness. And yes, this fraud scandal, I think, is directly related to what we're seeing now. Another big question that I think is starting to get raised is, who is funding all this? I mean, clearly not all of it is organic.
That's where I'm going next.
Yeah. I mean, there's this climate change boondoggle called I think it's called the Sunrise Movement. It's like a very far left pro climate change group. The Washington Free Beacon did a whole expose on it a couple weeks ago. They become something of a slush fund, trying to get funding from the Soros Open Society Foundation, Tides Foundation, Ford Foundation, all these left-wing foundations. So a lot of these folks definitely are being paid the same way that the pro-Hamas garbage on campus after October 7th, a lot of that was paid. The left has a very well-oiled paid protest machine. I'm sure some of this is organic, but I think less of it is organic than most Americans realize.
Well, you know what? I work with a group. I'm writing a book on the ways in which essentially our government and our society has been co-opted by the four industries of ag, food, farm, and insurance. And they're called the Government Accountability Institute, but they're also the ones that were informing Donald Trump about the Neville Roy Singhams, the Alex Soros group, all the groups, your Tides Foundation, Arabella Network, everything you're talking about. So this one guy Neville Roy Singham, he's actually an American, if you can believe it or not, but he's the same dude that's been funding everything from like the pro-Palestinian protests, the No Kings, all the anti-ICE stuff, or one of, right? And he's a billionaire from America, but he's connected to the CCP. Vincent Lowe, this is another one. I want to understand, is that not a crime? Like, if you're funding propaganda and you're paying for these signal chats and all the tents and the legal fees and the bail, you're essentially organizing what kind of appears to be a bit of an insurrection, honestly. They're literally going after, they think of law enforcement as not people here to protect us, but enemies of their state. Is there no recourse with the Alex Soroses, the Neville Roy Singhams, all these guys?
It's tricky. I mean, it is a fine line, right? I mean, a lot of this is protected speech. Not all of it is. I mean, personally, Jillian, I mean, this is just me personally.
Yeah.
I take the First Amendment very perhaps more literally than many do. So when I see free speech, to me, that's really free speech. Now, most lawyers, I think most judges interpret speech to also be most forms of conduct. I actually don't personally buy that. To me, conduct and speech are actually very different things. I think about the flag burning case. So in the late 80s, there was a case called Texas versus Johnson. Is there a First Amendment right to burn the American flag? And to me, the answer is no, because burn the American flag is not an act of speech. It is an act of conduct. And by the way, it's potentially a very dangerous act of conduct.
Right.
I mean, it's a fire, after all. There could be like hazards here. There could be arson, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So, I mean, to me, again, you have a right to stand on a sidewalk and to say whatever crap you want to say. But if you are actively, personally taking measures that are not just speech but conduct, and the conduct is geared towards undermining or obstructing the law,
but they Josh. They're funding these guys to go out there and wreak havoc. Damage ICE vehicles, dox these agents. I mean, that's where I'm like, where is the line? All right, guys, if you like this clip and you want to watch the full episode, click here. And if you want more content like this, you can subscribe to the show by clicking here.